The courtroom felt like it was closing in on me. Every breath I took seemed to echo against the polished wooden walls, amplifying my anxiety. The air smelled of lemon-scented polish and desperation, mostly mine. My hands trembled as I adjusted the bundle in my arms, my 4-month-old daughter Emma sleeping peacefully, unaware that her future hung in the balance of this sterile room. I'd chosen a simple navy dress, the nicest thing I owned that still fit my post-pregnancy body. The fabric itched against my skin as sweat beaded along my hairline. 6 months ago, I'd been Sophia Turner, happily married waitress at Luigi's Italian restaurant. Now I was just another desperate woman seeking divorce, clutching a baby whose father didn't even know she existed. "Ms. Turner, the respondent is arriving. Please take your seat," my court-appointed lawyer whispered, her breath smelling of coffee and mint. Ms. Winters was kind but overworked. I was just another case file to her, another woman escaping a marriage that had crumbled under the weight of lies. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely audible as I sank into the hard wooden chair. Emma stirred slightly, her tiny fingers curling against the soft pink blanket I'd spent 3 paychecks to afford. The courtroom doors swung open, and I kept my eyes fixed on Emma's peaceful face. I couldn't bear to look up, not yet. The shuffle of expensive shoes against marble filled the sudden silence. One pair moved with deliberate, measured steps that I'd recognize anywhere, the confident stride of a man who owned every room he entered. I hadn't seen Vincent Russo in 8 months, not since the night I discovered the truth, that the charming restaurant owner I'd fallen for and married after a whirlwind romance wasn't just a successful businessman. He was the businessman of Chicago's underworld, the head of the Russo crime family. The night I found the gun and blood-stained shirt hidden in our bedroom, the night I overheard a phone call about taking care of someone who'd crossed him, the night I realized I was married to a monster. I'd fled that same night, disappearing with nothing but the clothes on my back and the unborn child I hadn't yet told him about. A child conceived in love before I knew the truth. All rise for the Honorable Judge Michaels. The command jolted me from my memories. I struggled to my feet, careful not to wake Emma. As I rose, my eyes inadvertently lifted, and there he was. Vincent stood on the opposite side of the courtroom, flanked by 2 men in dark suits, his security detail never far from his side. A third man in an expensive suit, his lawyer undoubtedly, whispered something in his ear. But Vincent wasn't listening. He was staring directly at me. No, not at me, at the baby in my arms. I watched as the color drained from his face. Vincent Russo, the man who had ordered executions without blinking an eye, the man who controlled half of Chicago's underworld with an iron fist, looked as though someone had knocked the wind out of him. His normally impassive face showed shock, confusion, and something else. A fierce intensity that sent shivers down my spine. His dark eyes, the same ones that had once looked at me with such tenderness, now burned with questions. The scar that ran along his right jawline, a reminder of his violent past, seemed more pronounced against his suddenly pale skin. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the table in front of him. "Mr. Russo," his lawyer murmured, trying to regain his attention. But Vincent remained frozen, his gaze locked on Emma. Judge Michaels entered, but Vincent didn't move. It wasn't until one of his guards touched his elbow that he mechanically sat down, his eyes never leaving my daughter, our daughter. "We are here today for the dissolution of marriage between Sophia Turner and Vincent Russo," Judge Michaels began, his voice fading into background noise as panic rose in my chest. I'd been careful, so careful. I'd moved 3 times in 8 months, used a different name, paid for everything in cash, worked at a small diner where nobody asked questions about the pregnant woman with fear in her eyes. I'd done everything to ensure Vincent would never find me or know about our child. Yet here I was, sitting across from him in a courtroom, his eyes boring into the daughter he never knew existed. I'd only filed for divorce because I needed it legally finished, needed to sever all ties before disappearing permanently. I'd used my real name on the filing because I had to, but I'd trusted in the system's slow pace, and Vincent's apparent lack of interest in finding me. I was a fool. "Ms. Turner, are you represented by counsel today?" the judge asked, pulling me back to the present. Yes, Your Honor," Ms. Winters replied, standing beside me. "And Mr. Russo." Mr. Dominic Vasquez representing Mr. Russo, Your Honor, the sleek lawyer responded. His voice oozed confidence and privilege. The kind of lawyer only serious money could buy. Very well. I understand this is a petition for dissolution of marriage. Are there any contested assets or matters to be resolved? Before Ms. Winters could speak, Vincent's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has just become aware of information that substantially changes the nature of these proceedings. We request a continuance to confer with our client. The judge looked annoyed. Mr. Vasquez, what information could possibly have emerged in the 30 seconds since you entered my courtroom? Vincent stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The child, Your Honor. His voice, deep and accented with the Italian of his heritage, sent a familiar shudder through me. I was not aware of the child. All eyes in the courtroom turned to me. To Emma, I clutched her tighter, protectively. Ms. Turner, the judge addressed me directly. Is this the respondent's child? My heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. I felt lightheaded, trapped. Vincent's gaze pinned me like a butterfly to a board. Ms. Turner? The judge prompted again. My voice failed me. Yes or no, Ms. Turner? Is this man the father of your child? I looked down at Emma, her perfect little face peaceful in sleep. Dark lashes against her cheeks, the small cleft in her chin identical to her father's. Yes, I whispered, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence. Vincent's intake of breath was audible across the courtroom. When I dared to look up, the expression on his face had transformed. The shock was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Possession. Your Honor, Vincent's lawyer spoke smoothly. In light of this revelation, we request immediate genetic testing to confirm paternity and a hold on all divorce proceedings until matters of custody can be addressed. No! The word escaped me before I could stop it. Emma startled at my outburst, her little face scrunching before settling again. Ms. Turner. The judge's voice carried a warning. Your Honor, Ms. Winters interjected. My client has concerns about Mr. Russo's character and lifestyle that bear directly on the safety and well-being of the child. Vincent's expression darkened dangerously. One of his guards leaned forward slightly, an almost imperceptible movement that nonetheless screamed of violence barely contained. These are serious allegations, Counselor, the judge replied. Do you have evidence to present to the court? My lawyer hesitated, and I knew why. What evidence could I present? That I'd found a gun? That I'd overheard cryptic phone conversations? That the restaurant he owned was frequented by men with bulges under their jackets who spoke in hushed tones? Nothing concrete, nothing that would stand against Vincent's power, his connections. Your Honor, Vincent's lawyer interjected smoothly. Regardless of any unsubstantiated claims, my client has a fundamental right to know his child and participate in her life. Ms. Turner has deliberately concealed this child's existence from her father. For how old is the child? 4 months, I whispered, feeling the noose tighten. 4 months, Vasquez repeated triumphantly. Mr. Russo has missed the first 4 months of his daughter's life because of Ms. Turner's deception. I watched in horror as Vincent's expression shifted. To anyone else, he might have appeared to be an injured father, deprived of his rights. But I knew better. I saw the calculation behind his eyes, the slight curl of his lip. He wasn't just shocked or hurt. He was furious. And Vincent Russo's fury was something I'd spent 8 months running from. Your Honor, Vincent spoke directly, his voice controlled but intense. I request a private meeting with Ms. Turner before we proceed further. Mr. Russo, that's not how these proceedings— 10 minutes, Your Honor, to discuss our daughter. He emphasized the word our in a way that made my blood run cold. The judge looked between us, then sighed. I'll allow a 15-minute recess for the parties to confer with their counsel. Court will reconvene at 10:45. The gavel struck, and my heart sank. Vincent immediately turned to his lawyer, speaking rapidly in hushed tones. His guards positioned themselves near the courtroom exits. I was trapped. Ms. Winters. I clutched at my lawyer's sleeve. I can't speak to him. You don't understand, Sophia, she said gently. This might be our best opportunity to negotiate favorable terms. Mr. Russo appears motivated to resolve this matter. If only she knew what that motivation meant. As people began to file out for the recess, Vincent's eyes found mine again across the room. He nodded slightly to one of his men, who moved to stand by the door. "Ms. Turner," Vincent called, his voice carrying easily across the now emptying room. "Shall we use the conference room?" He gestured to a door off to the side. I looked desperately at Ms. Winters, who nodded encouragingly, completely misreading my terror for nervousness. Emma began to stir in my arms, making small fussing noises that threatened to become full cries. I bounced her gently, my heart racing. "I'll be with you," Ms. Winters assured me, gathering her papers. Vincent approached slowly, his guards maintaining a respectful distance but watching every move. Up close, I could see the changes in him since I'd left. New lines around his eyes, a hardness to his mouth that hadn't been there before, but still devastatingly handsome in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, the gold of his watch catching the fluorescent light. "Sophia," he said softly, his eyes moving from mine to the baby in my arms. "May I?" I instinctively stepped back, tightening my hold on Emma. "Don't touch her." Something flashed in his eyes, hurt, anger, I couldn't tell, before his expression smoothed into practiced neutrality. "As you wish. For now." The implied threat wasn't lost on me. I followed him into the conference room, Ms. Winters beside me, his lawyer and one guard following behind. The door closed with a soft click that sounded to my ears like a jail cell locking. Vincent sat at the head of the table, naturally assuming the position of power. I took a seat as far from him as possible. "Perhaps introductions are in order," Vincent said smoothly. "It seems I've missed some significant events." His eyes never left Emma, who had fully awakened now and was looking around curiously, with eyes the exact shade of chocolate brown as her father's. "Her name is Emma," I said stiffly. "Emma Marie Turner." "Turner?" Vincent's eyebrow raised. "Not Russo?" "No." Vincent's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "And when were you planning to inform me that I had a daughter, Sophia?" "Mr. Russo," Ms. Winters interjected, "my client had concerns about—" "I'm speaking to my wife," Vincent cut her off, his voice soft but brooking no argument. "Sophia?" Those dark eyes that had once made me feel cherished now made me feel like prey. I swallowed hard. I wasn't. The silence that followed my admission was deafening. Vincent's face remained perfectly composed, but I knew better. The slight twitch at the corner of his eye, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. These were the warning signs I'd learned to recognize during our marriage, precursors to a storm. "You weren't," he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You weren't going to tell me about my own flesh and blood." Emma chose that moment to let out a small, gurgling laugh, reaching one tiny hand toward the ceiling light. The sound seemed to pierce Vincent's controlled facade. His eyes softened momentarily as they fixed on our daughter. "Mr. Russo," my lawyer tried again, "perhaps we should focus on the legal matters at hand." "I'd like a moment alone with my wife," Vincent said, still watching Emma with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "That's not advisable," Ms. Winters replied. Vincent's lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps just 5 minutes? We can step outside the door." "No," I said immediately. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of our attorneys." Vincent's eyes snapped back to mine, and I regretted my defiance instantly, not because I feared he would hurt me physically. Vincent had never raised a hand to me during our marriage, but because I recognized the look of a predator calculating its next move. "Very well," he conceded with a slight nod. "Let's discuss the reality of our situation, then. You've hidden my daughter from me. You've filed for divorce without so much as a conversation. And now you sit across from me as though I'm the villain in this story." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "What exactly did you think would happen today, Sophia?" I shifted Emma to my other arm, buying time to steady my voice. I thought I would get my divorce and move on with my life, with my child. With my daughter, yes. Vincent's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Let me be clear, cara mia. There will be no divorce today. There will be no moving on with your life. Not without me." Ms. Winters straightened beside me. Mr. Russo, threatening language isn't... It's not a threat, Vincent interrupted smoothly. It's a statement of fact. I have rights as Emma's father. Rights I intend to exercise fully. Rights? I couldn't hold back my bitter laugh. You talk about rights while your men stand guard at the doors, while you intimidate everyone in this building? Don't pretend this is about being a father, Vincent. This is about control. It always has been with you. A flash of genuine anger crossed his face before he schooled his features. You know nothing of my intentions. I know enough, I countered, feeling braver with my lawyer beside me and Emma in my arms. I know who you really are, what you really do. That's why I left. That's why I kept Emma away from you. Vincent's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should return to the legal... No, Vincent said sharply, not taking his eyes off me. I want to hear exactly what my wife thinks she knows about me. The challenge hung in the air between us. I glanced at Ms. Winters, who looked increasingly concerned. This was dangerous territory, but I'd been running too long to back down now. You're not just a restaurant owner, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The Russo family doesn't just run Italian restaurants. The blood on your shirt that night, the calls about taking care of problems, the men who come to the restaurant with envelopes full of cash. I swallowed hard. I know what you are, Vincent. The room fell completely silent. Even Emma seemed to sense the tension, her little body growing still in my arms. Vincent's lawyer looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Vincent, however, remained perfectly composed. After a long moment, he spoke. And yet, despite these concerns, you married me. You shared my bed. You carried my child. His eyes flickered briefly to Emma. Were you afraid of me then, Sophia? The question caught me off guard. No, I admitted honestly. Not until I knew the truth. Something like satisfaction crossed his face. Because I never gave you reason to fear me. I never harmed you. I provided for you, protected you, loved you. The last word sounded strange coming from him now. Here, in this sterile conference room with lawyers and guards present. Your business is hurting people, I whispered. Vincent shrugged almost imperceptibly. My business is my business. My family is something else entirely. He leaned forward. And make no mistake, Sophia, you and Emma are my family. The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. Emma began to fuss, perhaps sensing my distress. I bounced her gently, trying to soothe her. She's hungry, I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. We should reconvene in the courtroom, Ms. Winters suggested, checking her watch. The recess is nearly over. Vincent's eyes remained fixed on Emma, who was becoming increasingly agitated. When did you feed her last? The normalcy of the question amid our tense standoff threw me. About 3 hours ago. He nodded as though this information was crucial. And how often does she need to eat? Every 3 to 4 hours, I replied automatically. Then she needs to be fed now. It wasn't a question, but a statement, delivered with the same authority he used when running his criminal empire. The judge will wait. Before I could protest, Vincent stood and moved toward the door, speaking rapidly in Italian to his guard. The man nodded and stepped out. Vincent turned back to me. I've arranged for a private room where you can feed her in comfort. There's a small lounge adjacent to the courtroom. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said, though Emma's cries were growing louder. Vincent's expression softened fractionally. Sophia, whatever you think of me, surely you know I would never harm my own child, or her mother. He glanced at my lawyer. Ms. Winters is welcome to accompany you, of course. I looked to my lawyer for guidance. She seemed conflicted. It would be better than trying to manage in the courtroom, she admitted reluctantly. We still have 15 minutes before the judge returns. I felt cornered, but Emma's needs came first. Fine. Vincent led the way, his guard clearing a path through the courthouse hallway. People instinctively moved aside as we approached, responding to something in Vincent's demeanor that commanded respect or fear. I followed, keeping Ms. Winters between us like a shield. The lounge was small but comfortable, with a leather sofa and armchair arranged around a coffee table. Vincent gestured for me to sit on the sofa. I'll wait outside, he said, surprising me with his discretion. Take your time. As he turned to leave, Emma's cries hit a new pitch. Vincent paused, looking back at our daughter with an expression I couldn't quite read. "She has your nose," he observed quietly, but my eyes. Before I could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. I sank onto the sofa, adjusting my dress to feed Emma. Ms. Winters sat in the armchair, looking troubled. "Sophia," she said softly, "I need to be frank with you. If Mr. Russo pursues custody, things could get very complicated." I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the weight of my situation crushing down on me. "I know. The allegations you've made about his business activities, without concrete evidence, they won't help your case. In fact, they could harm it if they're perceived as attempts to alienate a father from his child. So I'm supposed to just hand my daughter over to a criminal?" I hissed, keeping my voice low. Ms. Winters sighed. "The court doesn't know he's a criminal. They see a wealthy businessman whose wife left without explanation and hid his child from him. It doesn't look good, Sophia." I knew she was right, and the realization made me feel sick. I'd been naive to think I could simply walk into a courthouse and cut ties with Vincent Russo. Men like him didn't lose. Not in court, not in business, not in life. Emma fed contentedly, unaware of the storm swirling around her tiny existence. I traced her soft cheek with my finger, memorizing every feature of her perfect face. Whatever happened, I had to protect her. Somehow. A gentle knock at the door made me tense. "Ms. Winters rose to answer it, opening the door just enough to see who was there. "The judge is ready to resume," came Vincent's voice from the hallway. "Take your time. I've explained the situation." After Emma finished feeding, I adjusted my clothing and took a deep breath, preparing to face what awaited me in the courtroom. When I opened the door, Vincent was waiting, his back against the opposite wall, his guard a few feet away. His eyes immediately went to Emma, now calm and drowsy after her meal. Something like longing crossed his face, so fleeting I almost missed it. "May I hold her?" he asked softly. The question caught me off guard. Part of me wanted to refuse, to keep Emma as far from him as possible. But another part, the part that remembered how gentle Vincent's hands could be, how carefully he'd once held his sister's child, hesitated. "Just be careful with her head," I found myself saying, the words escaping before I could stop them. Vincent stepped forward slowly, as though approaching a frightened animal. When he reached me, he carefully extended his arms. With trembling hands, I placed Emma in her father's embrace for the first time. The transformation in Vincent's face was immediate and startling. The hard lines softened. The calculating coldness in his eyes melted into something I recognized from our early days together. Wonder, tenderness. He cradled Emma with expert care, supporting her head perfectly. "Ciao, piccola mia," he whispered, his Italian accent thickening with emotion. "Hello, my little one." Emma's eyes, droopy with post-feeding contentment, focused briefly on his face. Vincent smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, not the practiced charm he showed the world. Something twisted painfully in my chest. This was the man I'd fallen in love with. The man I'd thought Vincent truly was before I discovered the monster beneath the mask. Seeing him hold our daughter with such tenderness made the lines blur in a way that terrified me. The moment was broken by the appearance of Vincent's lawyer at the end of the hallway. "Mr. Russo, the judge is waiting." Vincent nodded without looking away from Emma. When he finally raised his eyes to meet mine, they were filled with a determination that sent a chill through me. "She's perfect," he said simply, carefully transferring Emma back to my arms. His fingers brushed mine in the exchange, and I flinched at the contact. Vincent noticed, his jaw tightening slightly. "We should go," Ms. Winters urged, glancing nervously between us. Back in the courtroom, Judge Michaels looked impatient. "I trust the parties have had time to discuss the new circumstances?" Vincent's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. In light of the revelation that Mr. Russo has a daughter he was unaware of, we are requesting that all divorce proceedings be stayed pending custody and paternity determinations." "Your Honor," Ms. Winters countered, "my client is not contesting that Mr. Russo is the father. However, we believe the divorce should proceed independently of custody matters, which can be addressed subsequently." Judge Michaels looked thoughtful. Mr. Vasquez, is your client requesting paternity testing, despite Ms. Turner's acknowledgement? As a formality, yes, Vincent's lawyer replied smoothly. Given the unusual circumstances of Ms. Turner's departure and her deliberate concealment of the pregnancy, the judge turned to me. Ms. Turner, why did you leave your husband without informing him of the pregnancy? I clutched Emma closer, feeling all eyes on me. I had concerns for my safety, Your Honor. It wasn't entirely a lie. Vincent's face remained impassive, but I saw his hand clench into a fist at his side. What specific threats did Mr. Russo make? The judge asked. He didn't explicitly threaten me, I admitted, but I discovered aspects of his business that frightened me. Judge Michaels looked skeptical. Ms. Turner, this court deals in facts, not vague impressions. Unless you have specific allegations of abuse or threats, Mr. Russo has every right to know his child and participate in her upbringing. Your Honor, Vincent's lawyer interjected. My client is a respected business owner in this community. He owns 3 successful restaurants and employs over 60 people. Ms. Turner's insinuations are not only harmful, but entirely without foundation. I wanted to scream. Of course, there would be no record of Vincent's criminal activities. Men like him didn't leave evidence. His restaurants were legitimate, successful fronts for operations that remained in the shadows. The judge nodded, seeming satisfied with the lawyer's explanation. Here's what we're going to do. I'm ordering paternity testing to be completed within the week. In the meantime, I'm issuing a temporary order prohibiting either party from leaving the jurisdiction with the minor child. He looked directly at me. Ms. Turner, where are you currently residing? I hesitated, panic rising in my throat. I'm staying with a friend. Address, please. I gave the address of the small apartment I'd been renting under a different name, knowing it would no longer be safe after today. And your current employment? I work at the Bluebird Diner on Oakley Avenue. A job I would now have to leave. The judge made notes. Mr. Russo, your residence? I maintain our marital home at 1420 Lakeshore Drive, Vincent replied smoothly. The home Sophia left, which remains exactly as she left it, awaiting her return. The possessive implication in his words made my skin crawl. Very well, Judge Michaels continued. Pending the paternity results and further custody determinations, I'm ordering supervised visitation for Mr. Russo. 3 2-hour visits per week to take place at Ms. Turner's residence with a court-appointed supervisor present. Your Honor, Vincent's lawyer spoke up. Given the circumstances, we request daily visitation. My client has already missed 4 months of his daughter's life. The judge considered this. I'll allow daily visits, 1 hour each for the next week. After paternity is confirmed, we'll revisit the schedule. The divorce proceedings are stayed until custody and support matters are resolved. The gavel came down, and I felt my world collapsing around me. Vincent would now have court-sanctioned access to our home, to our lives. The prison I'd so carefully escaped was reforming around me, bar by bar. As people began to file out of the courtroom, Vincent approached, his expression unreadable. I'll see you this evening, he said quietly. 6 o'clock. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. The supervisor will be there, I reminded him, a feeble attempt to assert some control. Vincent's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course. I look forward to spending time with my daughter. His gaze moved from Emma to me, intensity burning behind the casual facade. And to continuing our conversation, Sophia. There is much we need to discuss. As he turned to leave, flanked by his ever-present guards, I knew with absolute certainty this was only the beginning. Vincent Russo had found us, and he would never let us go again. The hours after court passed in a blur of panic and preparation. Ms. Winters had driven me back to my small apartment, her face grave as she outlined my limited options. He'll get visitation rights at minimum, she'd explained. With his resources, he could push for joint custody or more. Now, as the clock inched toward 6, I paced the worn carpet of my 1-bedroom apartment, bouncing Emma gently in my arms. I'd spent the afternoon obsessively cleaning, though there was little I could do to disguise the shabbiness of the place, the water stain on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture I'd acquired piece by piece from thrift stores, the crack in the bathroom mirror. A far cry from the lakefront mansion where Vincent and I had lived during our marriage, a home I'd once loved for its sweeping views and elegant spaces, before I discovered it had been paid for with blood money. A sharp knock at the door made me freeze. I checked my watch. 5:55 p.m. Vincent was early. Of course he was. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to find a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Ms. Turner, I'm Patricia Malone, court-appointed visitation supervisor." She showed me her credentials. "May I come in?" "Yes, of course." I stepped aside, relief washing over me that the supervisor had arrived before Vincent. Patricia entered, quickly surveying the apartment with practiced eyes. "I'll need to do a brief inspection before Mr. Russo arrives." I nodded, clutching Emma closer as Patricia moved efficiently through the small space, making notes on her clipboard. She had just finished when another knock came at the door. Exactly at 6. Vincent's precision timing hadn't changed. Patricia moved to answer it. I remained rooted in place, heart hammering as the door swung open. Vincent filled the doorframe, his imposing height emphasized by his perfectly tailored suit. Different from the one he'd worn in court, I noticed absently. Dark blue this time, with a subtle pattern. He'd changed, prepared. His hair was freshly combed, his jaw cleanly shaven. He looked every bit the successful businessman, not a trace of the criminal underworld visible to the untrained eye. Behind him, I could see one of his guards stationed in the hallway. Never alone, never unprotected. "Mr. Russo," Patricia greeted him professionally. "I'm Patricia Malone, your court-appointed supervisor." Vincent nodded politely. "A pleasure, Ms. Malone." His eyes found mine over Patricia's shoulder, intense and unreadable. Then they dropped to Emma in my arms. And something in his expression shifted, softened in a way that made my chest ache despite myself. "Please come in," Patricia directed, explaining the rules as Vincent stepped inside, his presence immediately making my small apartment feel cramped. "I'll be present throughout the visit. I won't interfere unless necessary, but I will be observing and taking notes. The visit is scheduled for 1 hour." Vincent nodded again, but I could tell he was barely listening. His attention was fixed entirely on Emma, who was awake and alert, her dark eyes, his eyes, taking in this new person with the unguarded curiosity of infancy. "Would you like to sit?" I managed, gesturing to the small sofa, the nicest piece of furniture I owned, though it sagged slightly in the middle. Vincent moved with measured grace, lowering himself onto the sofa. Up close, I caught the familiar scent of his cologne. Sandalwood and something distinctly masculine. A scent that once represented safety, now a warning. "May I hold her?" he asked, his voice softer than I'd heard it in a long time. I hesitated, then carefully transferred Emma to his waiting arms, our fingers brushing momentarily. Unlike in the courthouse, I didn't flinch away this time. I couldn't afford to show weakness, not with the supervisor watching. Vincent adjusted Emma in his arms with surprising expertise. Our daughter stared up at him, her little brow furrowing as though trying to solve a complex puzzle. "Hello again, Piccola," he murmured, tracing one finger gently along her chubby cheek. Emma's response was immediate and unexpected. She smiled, a toothless, dimpled grin that transformed her tiny face. My heart sank. Even my daughter was falling under Vincent's spell. "She's alert for her age," Vincent observed, his eyes never leaving her face. "Strong, too." He tested her grip by offering his finger, which she immediately latched onto with surprising strength. "She started grabbing things at 3 months," I said automatically, then regretted offering the information. Every detail about Emma felt like something precious I should guard from him. Vincent nodded, absorbing this fact with the same intensity he applied to everything. "She has your nose," he said, echoing his earlier observation. "But my eyes, my mother's chin, I think." The casual mention of family, of connection and lineage, made my stomach tighten. I'd never met Vincent's mother. She had died before we met, but I'd seen photos. He was right about the chin. "Has she started trying to roll over yet?" Vincent asked, again surprising me with his knowledge of infant development. "Yes, just last week." A small smile of pride touched his lips. "Advanced," he murmured, as though Emma's milestone was a personal achievement. Patricia observed our interaction quietly from the small dining chair I'd positioned near the sofa. Her pen moved occasionally across her notepad, recording God knows what about this surreal scene. For several minutes, Vincent simply held Emma, talking to her softly in a mix of English and Italian. The tender scene was so at odds with what I knew about him, about the blood on his shirt that night, the hushed phone conversations about problems that needed handling. The cognitive dissonance made me dizzy. "You're in a safe place now, Emma," Vincent murmured, so quietly I almost missed it. "Papa's here now." I stiffened. "She's perfectly safe with me." Vincent's eyes flicked up to mine, sharp and assessing. "In this neighborhood? In this building with broken security locks and windows that don't seal properly?" He glanced around the apartment. "How many jobs are you working to afford even this place, Sophia?" "That's not relevant to your visitation," I said, my voice tight. Patricia cleared her throat softly. "Let's keep the conversation focused on Emma, shall we?" Vincent inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement, but his eyes held mine for a moment longer, communicating clearly. "This conversation isn't over." He returned his attention to Emma, who was beginning to fuss. "What does she need?" "She's probably getting hungry again," I said, glancing at the clock. "Nearly Emma's feeding time. May I feed her?" Vincent asked, looking between me and Patricia. The supervisor turned to me. "That's up to you, Ms. Turner." I hesitated. The thought of Vincent handling such an intimate parental duty made me uncomfortable, but refusing would look bad in Patricia's report. "I'll prepare a bottle," I said, rising to move to the tiny kitchenette. "You don't breastfeed anymore?" Vincent asked, his tone neutral. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I do, but I expressed milk earlier, for the visit. I'd anticipated not wanting to breastfeed in front of him. The vulnerability of it felt too intimate, too exposed." I warmed the bottle quickly, testing the temperature on my wrist with practiced movements. When I returned, Vincent was gently bouncing Emma, who had begun to cry in earnest. "She has your impatience," he remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. I sat beside him, close enough to pass the bottle but maintaining as much distance as the small sofa allowed. "Do you want me to show you how to feed her?" "I remember how," Vincent said simply. Of course. He'd held his niece as an infant. I'd forgotten. I watched as he adjusted Emma expertly, offering her the bottle at the perfect angle. She latched on immediately, her cries ceasing as she began to eat. "Perfect," Vincent murmured, pride evident in his voice. His thumb caressed Emma's temple as she fed, a gesture so gentle it was hard to believe these same hands had likely committed unspeakable acts of violence. "You seem quite natural with her, Mr. Russo," Patricia observed, making another note. Vincent didn't look up from Emma. "Children are precious. They should be treated with care." The simple statement hung in the air, loaded with implications in the context of who Vincent was, who I knew him to be. We sat in silence as Emma fed, the only sounds her occasional contented gurgles and the distant noise of traffic outside. I was acutely aware of Vincent beside me, of his controlled breathing, of the expensive watch on his wrist, of the faint scar on his right hand, a thin white line across his knuckles. I'd asked about that scar once. He'd told me he'd gotten it breaking up a fight at his restaurant. I wondered now whose blood had really caused it. When Emma finished the bottle, Vincent smoothly lifted her to his shoulder, patting her back gently until she burped. He did it with such easy confidence that an outsider would think he'd been caring for her since birth. "You've done well with her, Sophia," he said quietly. "She's healthy, strong, beautiful." The compliment caught me off guard. I'd expected accusations, not praise. "Thank you," I replied stiffly. Vincent adjusted Emma so she was cradled in one arm, facing him. His other hand reached into his jacket pocket, extracting a small velvet box. My breath caught. "I brought something for her," he said, opening the box to reveal a tiny gold bracelet with a small charm, a protective Italian horn, the cornicello. "Vincent, she's too young for jewelry," I protested. "It's a protection charm," he said, meeting my eyes. "From my family. My mother gave one to each of her children." The significance wasn't lost on me. He was marking her as a Russo. "You can keep it until she's older," Vincent added, offering me the box. "But it belongs to her." I took it reluctantly, knowing Patricia was watching this exchange with interest. "Thank you," I said again, this time more sincerely. Whatever else Vincent was, he clearly cared for our daughter in his own way. Emma began to fuss again, her little legs kicking against Vincent's arm. "She needs changing," I said, recognizing the signs. "I can do it," Vincent offered immediately. I hesitated, then nodded toward the changing table I'd set up in the corner of the living room. The bedroom was too small to accommodate it. Vincent rose smoothly, carrying Emma to the table. I followed, standing close by as he efficiently removed her soiled diaper and cleaned her with gentle hands. If Patricia was surprised by his competence, she didn't show it. "Your apartment is very small," Vincent observed quietly as he fastened a fresh diaper. "It's what I can afford," I replied defensively. "One bedroom?" "Yes." "Where does Emma sleep?" "With me." Vincent nodded, absorbing this information as he lifted our freshly changed daughter. "And your work at the diner, what are the hours?" "That's not relevant to my visitation," Vincent finished, a slight edge to his voice. "Everything about my daughter's living conditions is relevant to me, Sophia." I glanced at Patricia, who was watching us closely but not intervening. "I work mornings and early afternoons," I said finally. "My neighbor watches Emma. Is this neighbor qualified in childcare?" The questioning felt like an interrogation. "She raised 5 children of her own," I said, anger simmering beneath my calm facade. Vincent seemed to sense he was pushing too far. He returned to the sofa, Emma still in his arms. She was growing drowsy again, her eyelids drooping. "She's tired," he observed. "It's almost her bedtime," I confirmed. Vincent studied Emma's face as she fought sleep, her little mouth opening in a perfect O-shaped yawn. The tenderness in his expression made something twist painfully in my chest. "When I imagined becoming a father," he said softly, "I never thought I would miss the first months of my child's life." The accusation was clear beneath the seemingly benign statement. "I did what I thought was necessary to protect her," I replied, keeping my voice low. Vincent's eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "And what exactly were you protecting her from, Sophia?" The question hung between us, loaded and dangerous. Before I could formulate a response, Patricia intervened. "Mr. Russo, we have about 10 minutes left in today's visitation. Is there anything specific you'd like to do with Emma before we conclude?" Vincent didn't immediately respond, his gaze still locked with mine. Finally, he looked down at our now sleeping daughter. "I think she's made the decision for us," he said, a hint of resignation in his tone. Carefully, he stood and transferred Emma to my waiting arms. His fingers brushed against mine in the exchange, lingering just a moment too long. "Tomorrow at 6, then," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "We'll continue our conversation." The promise, or threat, made me shiver despite the warmth of the apartment. Patricia reviewed a few notes with Vincent, who nodded absently, his attention still focused on Emma and me. When it was time for him to leave, he paused at the door, turning back to look at us one last time. "Sleep well, Piccola," he murmured to Emma, then to me, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "Lock your door, Sophia. This building isn't secure." With that, he was gone, his guard falling into step beside him as they moved down the hallway. Patricia closed the door behind them, turning to me with a professional smile. "That went well, I think. Mr. Russo seems very interested in being involved in Emma's life." If only she knew just how involved Vincent Russo intended to be, not just in Emma's life, but in mine as well. The bracelet in its velvet box sat on the coffee table, a glittering reminder that in Vincent's world, what belonged to him was never truly free. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay beside Emma in our shared bed, listening to her soft breathing while my mind raced with contingency plans, each more desperate than the last. Running was no longer an option, not with court orders in place, and Vincent watching my every move. My meager savings wouldn't get us far anyway. I was trapped. Morning came too quickly. The pale light filtering through the thin curtains found me exhausted but resolute. I needed help, real help, not just a court-appointed lawyer overwhelmed with cases. I needed someone who understood what Vincent was capable of. After feeding and changing Emma, I called the diner to explain my situation, or a sanitized version of it. My boss, Martha, a gruff woman with surprising compassion beneath her tough exterior, agreed to hold my job for a week. "Family troubles happen to everyone, honey," she said. "Your spot at the counter will be waiting." I thanked her, knowing I might never return. Nothing about my life felt certain anymore. With Emma securely strapped to my chest in her carrier, I ventured out to the one place I thought might offer help, the Women's Resource Center downtown. I'd seen their flyers at the diner, escaping dangerous situations, emblazoned across the top. The center was housed in a nondescript building with security cameras at every entrance. Inside, the space was warm and inviting, despite the serious nature of its purpose. A woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from the reception desk as I entered. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need advice about my husband." The woman, Diane according to her name tag, nodded with understanding. "Is this an emergency situation?" Not immediate. But yes, it's serious." Diane led me to a small private room with comfortable chairs and toys in one corner. "Our counselor, Rachel, will be with you shortly. Would you like some tea while you wait?" The simple kindness nearly broke me. "Yes, please." 10 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes and a gentle demeanor entered with 2 cups of tea. She introduced herself as Rachel and sat across from me. "Diane mentioned you're seeking advice about your husband?" I nodded, adjusting Emma, who had fallen asleep against my chest. "Beautiful baby," Rachel observed. "How old?" 4 months, I replied, stroking Emma's dark hair. "She's why I'm here. I need to protect her." Over the next half hour, I explained my situation, my whirlwind romance with Vincent, our marriage, my discovery of his true nature, my flight, and now the court-ordered visitation. I was careful with my words, never explicitly stating that Vincent was in the Mafia, but implying enough for Rachel to understand the danger. Rachel listened without judgment, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she sat silent for a moment, contemplating. "Sophia," she said finally, "what you're describing is a very complex and potentially dangerous situation. Men with power and resources can be particularly difficult to escape." "I know," I whispered. "I tried running, and look where it got me." Rachel nodded. "Running is rarely a viable long-term solution, especially with a child involved. The courts tend to view parents who flee with children unfavorably, as you've discovered. So what do? I can't let him pull Emma into his world. Your concerns about your husband's business activities, without concrete evidence, will be challenging to present in court," Rachel said, echoing what Ms. Winters had already told me. "But there are steps we can take to build safety for you and Emma." She outlined several strategies, documenting every interaction with Vincent, setting clear boundaries, maintaining separate bank accounts, and preparing an emergency plan just in case. "We also have legal advocates who specialize in complicated custody situations," Rachel added. "They might be able to assist your court-appointed attorney." Hope flickered faintly within me. "When can I meet with them?" "I can arrange something for tomorrow. For today, let's focus on immediate safety planning for you and Emma." We spent the next hour developing strategies for navigating Vincent's visits. Rachel emphasized the importance of the court supervisor's presence and advised me on how to handle communication with Vincent. "Keep conversations centered on Emma," she advised. "Don't engage about your relationship or his business. Document everything, including what Emma wears during visits, how she behaves before and after, and anything concerning Vincent says or does." I soaked up her advice like a drowning woman grasping a lifeline. When we finished, Rachel escorted me to the front desk, where Diane provided a packet of resources and the business card for their legal advocate. "Call anytime, day or night," Rachel said, squeezing my hand. "You're not alone in this, Sophia." I left the center feeling marginally better, still trapped, but perhaps not entirely helpless. Emma and I spent the afternoon in a small park, savoring the fresh air and sunshine, before returning to the apartment to prepare for Vincent's evening visit. At precisely 6, the now familiar knock sounded. Patricia arrived first again, followed minutes later by Vincent. His eyes swept the apartment as he entered, taking in details I hadn't noticed him observing yesterday. I wondered what he was looking for, or cataloging. Emma was awake and alert, dressed in the nicest outfit I owned for her, a pale yellow dress with tiny embroidered flowers, a gift from a co-worker at the diner. Vincent's eyes softened when he saw her. that same transformation I'd witnessed before overtaking his features. "Hello, Piccola," he greeted her, then nodded to me. "Sophia." Today he wore a light gray suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. The contrast between his evident wealth and my struggling existence felt intentional, a silent reminder of what he could provide that I couldn't. "Would you like to hold her?" I offered, following Rachel's advice to focus interactions on Emma. Vincent nodded, settling onto the sofa and accepting Emma into his arms with practiced ease. She didn't fuss this time, instead regarding him with open curiosity. "She remembers me," he said, satisfaction evident in his tone. "Babies her age recognize faces after just a few exposures," I replied neutrally. Vincent's lips curved slightly. "She knows her father." The possessiveness in his voice made my skin prickle. I said nothing, watching as he spoke softly to Emma in Italian, the same melodic phrases he'd used yesterday. "What are you saying to her?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. Vincent glanced up, just telling her about her heritage, about the family she belongs to. The emphasis on family wasn't lost on me. I thought of the protective amulet he'd brought yesterday, the marker of her lineage. "I brought something else for her today," Vincent said, seemingly reading my thoughts. With one hand still cradling Emma securely, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small stuffed lion, soft and plush with a friendly face. "A lion?" I questioned, accepting the toy to examine it. "The lion is the king," Vincent explained, his eyes intent on mine. "Protected, respected, feared. No one harms the lion's cubs without consequences." The message beneath the seemingly innocent gift sent a chill through me. Vincent was marking his territory, making his intentions clear. I handed the lion back, watching as Vincent presented it to Emma, who immediately grabbed for it with eager hands. "She likes it," he observed with satisfaction. "She's at the age where she's grabbing everything," I said, trying to diminish the significance. Vincent nodded. Exploring her world, learning what's hers. The hour passed in similar fashion to yesterday, Vincent holding Emma, feeding her the bottle I'd prepared, changing her diaper with surprising competence. He asked questions about her routine, her development, her preferences. Normal father questions that felt abnormal coming from him. As the visit neared its end, Vincent handed the sleeping Emma back to me, his fingers lingering against mine for just a moment too long. "I've been thinking, Sophia," he said, his voice low enough that Patricia, making notes in her chair, wouldn't hear clearly. "This arrangement isn't sustainable." My chest tightened. "The court ordered it." "For now," he agreed, "but it's inefficient. Inconvenient for everyone." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already suspected. Vincent's dark eyes held mine. "Come home, Sophia. Bring our daughter home where she belongs." Though I'd anticipated it, the directness of his demand still stunned me. "This is our home now." Vincent's gaze swept the small apartment with undisguised disdain. "This is not a home fit for a Russo." "She's a Turner," I reminded him sharply. Something dangerous flashed in Vincent's eyes. "Not legally. Not yet. And not if I have anything to say about it." Patricia cleared her throat, reminding us of her presence. Vincent's expression immediately smoothed into pleasant neutrality. "Think about it," he said, rising to his feet. "Your job at the diner barely covers this place. Emma deserves better than hand-me-downs and a mother working herself to exhaustion." "We're managing fine," I insisted, though the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. The truth was, we were barely scraping by. Vincent adjusted his cuffs, a gesture I recognized from our marriage, a habit when he was restraining stronger emotions. "The paternity results will be back tomorrow. Once my rights are legally established, we'll revisit this conversation." The implicit threat hung in the air between us. Vincent's resources vastly outmatched mine. If he pushed for custody, could I really fight him? "I'll see you tomorrow evening," he said, turning to leave. At the door, he paused, looking back at Emma in my arms. "She sleeps peacefully. That's good." After Vincent and Patricia departed, I sank onto the sofa, holding Emma close, inhaling her sweet baby scent for comfort. Vincent's visit had left me shaken, but also confused. The tenderness he showed Emma seemed genuine, at odds with the calculating, dangerous man I knew him to be. The next day passed in a blur of anxiety. I met with the legal advocate from the Women's Resource Center, a sharp-eyed woman named Melanie who specialized in high-conflict custody cases. She reviewed my situation with a grimness that did little to reassure me. Without concrete evidence of illegal activity or direct threats to you or the baby, we're fighting an uphill battle, she admitted. His financial resources alone give him a significant advantage. So I just give up? I asked, desperation edging my voice. Melanie's expression softened. No. We fight smart. We document everything. We focus on Emma's best interests, and we prepare for every possibility. She helped me draft a proposed parenting plan that would allow Vincent visitation while maintaining my primary custody. It felt like a compromise I didn't want to make, but Melanie assured me it was our best tactical move. Show the court you're willing to facilitate a relationship between Emma and her father, she advised. It strengthens your position as the reasonable party. That evening, Vincent arrived for his visit with new energy, a barely contained intensity that set my nerves on edge immediately. The paternity test results came back, he announced without preamble, once Patricia had settled into her observational role. As expected, Emma is officially confirmed as my daughter. I nodded stiffly. I never disputed that. No, Vincent agreed, taking Emma into his arms with now practiced ease. But now it's a legal fact, not just your word. He seemed different today, more confident, if that were possible. More certain of his position. Emma sensed it too, fussing slightly in his hold until he soothed her with soft Italian words. I've filed for an emergency custody hearing, Vincent said casually, as though commenting on the weather. My lawyer submitted the paperwork this afternoon. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. On what grounds? Vincent's eyes met mine, cool and calculating. Inadequate living conditions, financial instability, potential flight risk, given your previous disappearing act. That's ridiculous, I hissed, mindful of keeping my voice down for Emma's sake. I left because I feared for our safety. So you claim, Vincent replied calmly. Without evidence. Mr. Russo, Patricia interjected. This visit is meant to focus on your interaction with Emma. Vincent inclined his head in acknowledgement, but his eyes remained locked with mine, communicating clear intent. The battle lines were drawn. For the remainder of the visit, Vincent was the picture of paternal devotion, reading to Emma from a small book he'd brought, showing her pictures on his phone of what I realized with a jolt was our old home, the mansion on Lakeshore Drive. He was painting a picture for her, and for Patricia, of the life he could provide. When the visit ended and he reluctantly handed Emma back to me, his parting words confirmed my worst fears. The hearing is scheduled for Monday morning, 3 days from now, he said softly. Consider your options carefully before then, Sophia. As the door closed behind him, I clutched Emma to my chest, my heart racing with panic and determination. 3 days to prepare for the fight of my life, the fight for my daughter's future. I had no illusions about what Vincent was offering. A gilded cage for both of us, where Emma would grow up surrounded by the very danger I'd fled, where she would learn that power came from fear and wealth from suffering, where she might one day inherit the Russo family business. That night, as Emma slept beside me, I made a promise to her and to myself. I would not let Vincent win, not without using every resource, every ounce of strength I possessed. If he wanted a war, he would get one. I just prayed I was strong enough to survive it. The weekend passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Melanie, the legal advocate, worked tirelessly alongside Ms. Winters to build our case, though neither woman seemed particularly optimistic. Vincent's resources dwarfed ours, his influence reaching into corners of the city I could only imagine. Focus on being the stable, loving parent you are, Melanie advised during our Sunday strategy session. The judge will be looking at who can provide the most consistent emotional support for Emma. But we both knew what the judge would also see: a financially struggling single mother versus a wealthy, established businessman. The scales felt impossibly tilted. Vincent's visits continued, Saturday and Sunday evenings, each marked by his immaculate appearance, his growing ease with Emma, and his subtle but persistent pressure on me. The hearing is unnecessary, he said on Sunday night as he rocked Emma gently. We could resolve this privately, Sophia. By me surrendering, I countered quietly. Vincent's eyes flashed. By you coming home, where you both belong. This isn't surrender. It's accepting reality. The reality that you're not who I thought you were. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You never gave me a chance to explain. Explain what, Vincent? The blood on your shirt? The threats I overheard? The envelopes of cash? Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her chair, pretending not to listen to our hushed conversation. Vincent leaned closer, his voice dropping further. There are reasons for everything, cara mia. Reasons I would have shared if you'd asked, instead of running. Would those reasons have changed anything? I challenged. His expression softened slightly. Perhaps not, but they might have helped you understand. Understand what? That you hurt people for a living? Vincent's eyes hardened again. That I protect what's mine. That family comes before everything. His gaze dropped to Emma sleeping in his arms. Always. The possessive way he held her, the intensity in his eyes, it frightened me more than any overt threat could have. Vincent wasn't just fighting for custody. He was claiming ownership. Monday morning dawned cold and gray, matching my mood perfectly. I dressed Emma in her nicest outfit. The yellow dress again, paired with a tiny cardigan a coworker had knitted for her. I wore my only proper dress, a navy blue sheath that had grown slightly loose since Emma's birth. My hair, pulled back in a simple bun, couldn't hide the dark circles under my eyes from another sleepless night. Ms. Winters met us at the courthouse, Melanie beside her with an additional stack of documents. They spoke in hushed tones as we waited outside the courtroom, occasionally glancing my way with expressions that did little to calm my nerves. Remember, Melanie said when they finally approached, stay calm, answer only what's asked, and keep focusing on Emma's needs. Don't let him provoke you into emotional outbursts. I nodded, bouncing Emma gently as she began to fuss. The courtroom doors opened, and my heart sank. Vincent was already inside, seated at a table with not one but 3 attorneys, Vasquez and 2 others I didn't recognize. He wore a conservative dark suit, his hair perfectly styled, his posture radiating confidence. His guards were nowhere to be seen, smart enough to know their presence might raise questions, but I spotted his driver lingering in the back row. As we entered, Vincent's eyes found mine, then moved to Emma. Something flickered across his face, possessiveness mingled with something softer, more genuine. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with, the man who had swept me off my feet with his charm and intensity. I looked away quickly. That man was an illusion, a mask worn to hide the monster beneath. Judge Harris, a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes, entered the courtroom. Unlike Judge Michaels, she had a reputation for being thorough and unswayed by status or wealth. A small spark of hope kindled in my chest. We're here for the emergency custody hearing in the matter of Russo versus Turner, Judge Harris began, reviewing the documents before her. I've read the petitions from both parties. Mr. Vasquez, as the moving party, you may begin. Vincent's lawyer rose smoothly. Your Honor, my client is seeking temporary full custody of his infant daughter, Emma Marie, with supervised visitation for the mother. My breath caught in my throat. Full custody. They were going for everything. On what grounds? Judge Harris asked, peering over her reading glasses. Ms. Turner has demonstrated instability and poor judgment, Vasquez began. She abandoned the marital home while pregnant, deliberately concealed her pregnancy and the child's birth from my client, and has been living in substandard conditions unsuitable for an infant. He continued, painting me as unstable, potentially dangerous, and certainly unfit. According to Vincent's legal team, I was a flight risk who might disappear with Emma again at any moment, depriving her of her father's presence and care. Additionally, Vasquez concluded, Ms. Turner works long hours at a diner, leaving the child with an unqualified neighbor. Mr. Russo can provide full-time professional childcare in a safe, stable environment, the same home where Ms. Turner herself lived happily until her unexplained departure. Judge Harris listened impassively, making occasional notes. When Vasquez finished, she turned to Ms. Winters. Counselor? Ms. Winters rose, looking small and underprepared compared to Vincent's legal team. Your Honor, Ms. Turner left the marital home due to legitimate concerns for her safety and well-being. While she cannot provide the same financial resources as Mr. Russo, she has been Emma's primary caregiver since birth, providing stable, loving care. She outlined my case, my deep bond with Emma, my efforts to provide for her, the stable routine we'd established. Melanie had helped prepare affidavits from my employer, my neighbor who watched Emma, and even a pediatrician who'd seen Emma twice since her birth, all testifying to my competent care. Ms. Turner is not opposed to Mr. Russo having a relationship with his daughter, Ms. Winters continued, but believes sudden removal from her primary attachment figure would be traumatic and harmful for Emma. Judge Harris nodded, her expression unreadable. I'd like to hear from the parents directly. She looked at me. Ms. Turner, please explain why you left your husband without informing him of your pregnancy. This was the moment, the question I'd been dreading. With Emma fussing in my arms, I took a deep breath. Your Honor, I discovered aspects of my husband's business that frightened me. I began carefully. I found a blood-stained shirt hidden in our home. I overheard conversations about handling people who had crossed him. I saw cash transactions that didn't seem legitimate. Vincent's expression remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. Did you confront your husband with these concerns? Judge Harris asked. No, Your Honor. I was afraid. Afraid of what, specifically? Did Mr. Russo ever threaten or harm you? I hesitated. He never physically harmed me, but once I realized what kind of business he was involved in, I feared what might happen if I stayed, especially with a child. Judge Harris turned to Vincent. Mr. Russo, would you care to address these allegations? Vincent stood, straightening his already perfect suit jacket. Your Honor, I own 3 successful restaurants in Chicago. My business dealings are entirely legitimate, as my tax returns and business records will attest. He gestured to a thick folder his lawyers had submitted. The shirt my wife refers to was stained when I helped a chef who cut himself in the kitchen. The conversations she overheard were about staff issues, handling problem employees, not whatever sinister interpretation she's applied. He spoke with such conviction, such reasonable certainty, that for a moment even I questioned my memories. This was Vincent's gift, his ability to make his version of reality seem like the only possible truth. As for the cash, he continued smoothly, restaurants deal in cash transactions daily. Nothing unusual or improper about that. Judge Harris studied him carefully. And why do you believe you should have custody of an infant who has been exclusively in her mother's care since birth? Vincent's expression softened as he glanced at Emma. Because she's my daughter, and she deserves the best of everything. Security, opportunity, stability. I can provide all of that. His eyes found mine. I never wanted Sophia to leave. Our home, Emma's rightful home, has remained exactly as it was, waiting for them to return. The sincerity in his voice was chilling precisely because it wasn't entirely fake. Vincent did want us back, as possessions, as extensions of himself and his legacy. Your Honor, I interjected, unable to stay silent. Emma needs her mother. She's still nursing. We have a bond that can't be replaced by wealth or material comfort. Judge Harris raised an eyebrow at my outburst, but nodded, a valid consideration. She turned back to Vincent. Mr. Russo, what childcare arrangements would you make if granted custody? I've hired a highly qualified nanny, Vincent replied. She has 20 years of experience with infants and impeccable references. She would live in, providing Emma with consistent care while allowing me to be present for all important moments. Of course he had. Vincent's preparation was always flawless. For the next hour, both sides presented evidence, financial records, living conditions, character witnesses. Vincent's team had photographs of my apartment that somehow made it look even shabbier than it was, while showcasing the lake house as a paradise of safety and luxury. They had psychological experts testifying that Emma's age made this an ideal time for transition, that she would adapt quickly to her new primary caregiver. Our side had the emotional bond, the biological connection of mother and child, but little else to compete with Vincent's resources. As the hearing neared its conclusion, Judge Harris leaned forward. Before I make my ruling, I have one question for each of you. She looked at Vincent first. Mr. Russo, if granted custody, how would you facilitate Ms. Turner's relationship with Emma? Vincent didn't hesitate. I would welcome Sophia's presence in our home, where she could have unlimited access to Emma in a safe, comfortable environment. If she prefers not to return home, I would arrange and finance appropriate visitation in a suitable location. The perfect answer, casting him as reasonable and generous. Judge Harris turned to me. Ms. Turner, the same question. If you retain custody, how will you ensure Mr. Russo has a meaningful relationship with his daughter? I swallowed hard. I would continue to facilitate supervised visitation as the court directs. As Emma grows older and if Mr. Russo proves himself to be... I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Focused solely on Emma's well-being, I would be open to expanding those visits. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Judge Harris noticed. Mr. Russo, you seem displeased with that answer. Vincent composed himself quickly. I simply believe Emma deserves better than supervised visits with her own father when I've done nothing to warrant such restrictions. Judge Harris nodded, making a final note before straightening. I'll take a 30-minute recess to review all evidence before issuing my ruling. As the judge left, I clutched Emma tighter, fear clenching my stomach. Ms. Winters patted my arm reassuringly, but the worry in her eyes betrayed her own concerns. Across the room, Vincent conferred with his lawyers, his expression intense. When he noticed me watching, he paused, meeting my gaze directly. Something unspoken passed between us. A recognition, perhaps, that whatever happened next would irrevocably shape all our lives. The recess felt eternal, but eventually Judge Harris returned, her expression grave. My heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear as she began speaking. In matters of custody, this court's primary concern is the best interest of the child, she began. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony with that principle foremost in mind. She looked between Vincent and me. While Mr. Russo can provide superior material advantages, Emma Marie is at an age where maternal bonding is crucial to healthy development. Disrupting that bond would not serve her best interests at this time. Hope bloomed in my chest. Vincent's expression darkened. However, Judge Harris continued, Mr. Russo has established paternity and demonstrated genuine interest in his daughter's welfare. He has a right to develop a meaningful relationship with her. She shuffled her papers, then delivered her ruling. Primary physical custody will remain with Ms. Turner for now. Mr. Russo will have progressively increasing visitation, beginning with supervised visits 3 times weekly. After 1 month, if these visits proceed without issue, supervision will be removed. After 3 months, overnight visits will begin. Relief and dismay warred within me. I'd kept Emma, but Vincent would have increasing access to her, and to me. Additionally, the judge added, I am ordering Ms. Turner to secure more suitable housing within 30 days. Mr. Russo will pay child support commensurate with his income, which shall be used partly for this purpose. She fixed me with a stern look. This court will reassess custody arrangements in 6 months, at which time both parents' ability to co-parent effectively will weigh heavily in any decision. The message was clear. Cooperate or risk losing Emma. As we rose for the judge's exit, Vincent's eyes found mine across the courtroom. His expression was unreadable, but I recognized the set of his shoulders, the slight lift of his chin. He hadn't gotten everything he wanted today. But Vincent Russo wasn't defeated, merely delayed. Outside the courtroom, as Ms. Winters discussed next steps, Vincent approached, his lawyers trailing behind. Congratulations, Sophia, he said, his voice carrying no trace of bitterness, for now. Vincent, I began, but he raised a hand to stop me. I'll be sending details of appropriate properties for you to consider. 3 bedrooms minimum, secure building, safe neighborhood. His tone brooked no argument. My daughter deserves better than where you've been keeping her. Before I could respond, he leaned closer, his voice dropping so only I could hear. This isn't over, Cara Mia. It's merely beginning. His eyes moved to Emma, softening visibly. She belongs with both of us. Eventually, you'll accept that reality. He reached out, gently touching Emma's cheek with one finger. She gurgled in response, reaching for his hand with her tiny fingers. The simple gesture felt like a prophecy. As Vincent turned and walked away, flanked by his legal team, I clutched Emma closer to my chest. I'd won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Vincent would use these court-ordered visits to wear down my defenses, to integrate himself further into our lives, to make himself indispensable to Emma. And part of me, a part I desperately tried to silence, wondered if that would be entirely bad. The tenderness in Vincent's eyes when he looked at our daughter was real. The protection he offered was real. In a world of uncertainty and struggle, could I truly blame Emma if she one day chose the safety and security her father offered? As we left the courthouse, stepping into the bright midday sun, I looked down at Emma's perfect face. Whatever happened, whatever Vincent did, I would fight to keep her safe, not just physically, but spiritually and morally. I would fight to show her that true strength came not from power over others, but from the courage to stand alone if necessary. And if someday Vincent truly proved himself changed, if he showed himself to be the man I'd once believed him to be, rather than the man I'd discovered, perhaps then we could find a middle path, a way forward that kept Emma surrounded by love without sacrificing her soul. It was a fragile hope, but as Emma smiled up at me, reaching for my face with complete trust, it was enough to take the first step into our uncertain future.